Well, there's no shortage of people to blame for the financial meltdown we've been through in the last year, from Wall Street bankers to regulators to middle America. Nearly everyone has taken some of the heat. But Bloomberg columnist Jonathan Weil found a few people who saw what was going down on Wall Street and just said no. Jonathan, great to see you.
You too.
First, before we talk about the people you mentioned, you found, talk about your research. How did you find these people in the first place?
These were names I'd been gathering over the past several months, even the past year. And so when the time came to, Lehman's anniversary is coming around, I just thought it was a nice opportunity to look back and remind people that there are actually some good news stories that came out of this whole crisis as far as people who stood up for what they believed in.
And who impressed you the most?
The top of my list was Dick Fuld. He is a chairman.
You're kidding.
Excuse me, Dick Evans. That was such a major gaffe. That was
I said
Dick Evans. He's a chairman and thank you for catching me. He's a chairman and CEO of Cullen Bankers in San Antonio, Texas, and he said no to the government's TARP money. He told them, look, They did their own analysis. They thought the true cost of this capital was much higher than what was advertised. They didn't need the money. They were profitable. They had plenty of capital. They called up the government and said, we don't want it.
But they also thought that if they took it, it would dilute their shareholder stake, correct?
Yes, correct. And for those reasons,
looking out for the shareholders.
Yes, I mean, if a lot of these bankers, including Dick Fuld, had been worried more about maximizing long-term shareholder value, maybe they would have come out of this a lot better.
So you don't think he was just lucky in their analysis that it worked out, that they maintained, they had enough capital?
If you look at that company's balance sheet, they have one of the strongest, most, fortress-like balance sheets that you'll find in,
Flush with capital, loan standards fine.
This is, just put this in perspective, there's some history here. Cullen was also the only one of the top 10 largest Texas banks during the survived the 1980 savings and loan crisis. So they've been through tough times before. I did it again. Evans has been there since 1970. Apologize, Mr. Evans. He's been there since 1971. When he first started out. So
he had experience on his side. Well, let's move on with the list, because you did have five people. So number two.
I won't screw up their names.
but Joseph St. Dennis, he stuck out. He stuck out for me. What's going on there?
Don't say there were no good guys at AIG. He was
He
was the vice president of accounting policy at AIG, Financial Products, the unit that blew up the entire company. And he was brought in 2006 to clean up their internal controls over financial reporting. He was finding errors all over the place, during his first year on the job. And the head of AIG Financial Products, Joe Cassano, started taking him off of the really, big issues that were coming up, including the credit default swaps.
And Jonathan, could I mention, because you write in this piece that in an October 2008 letter to congressional investigators, St. Dennis said Cassano had told him, quoting here, "I have deliberately excluded you from the valuation of the super seniors because I was concerned that you would pollute the process."
Pollute the process, which St. Dennis also wrote in that letter, meant that we bring transparency to the process.
Exactly.
And actually, have to recognize lost positions where they came up. They just never included him in on it. They demoted him. He said, I quit. He walked away from the $325,000 guaranteed bonus.
Did he whistleblow?
When he did that. Well, he spoke to the internal and the external auditors for AIG. There's been no indication, though, that he called up anybody from the government, but that's really a lot to ask of anybody.
And then you had three other people on your list. We're just running short of time, so let me get through.
The third on my list was a fellow named Chuck Bowser, who was the head of the Office of Finance for the Federal Home Loan Banks, another government-backed group of financial institutions. He didn't trust the books. He didn't believe the books. He didn't understand the books. And so rather than sign off on the financial statements, he resigned.
And Tom Linsenmeyer and Mark Siegel?
Of the Financial Accounting Standards Board, they are the two people at the FASB who in April, when Congress and the banks were all over them to try to pass rules to make it easy on banks and insurance companies, they said no and they voted against.
Jonathan Weil. Jonathan, always good to talk to you. Thanks. And you can read Jonathan's story and find out which two members of FASB stood up for the standards, as we just told you, even when Congress caved to bank pressure.